All right, in case you haven't heard yet, you're about to hear that Microsoft is considering the study of investing in Bitcoin with their treasury. How this has happened is quite interesting, and I want to walk through how this has happened. I want to walk through what it means. I want to walk through my conspiracy thinking around this and the bigger game that's being played here that everyone's not really going to focus on until it's too late. And of course, what I've tried to do is try and give you that information ahead of time. And you know, it's been on point with all the Bitcoin ETFs and everything else, and now you're seeing this unfold. So now I want to sit here and explain to you why this Microsoft news is, in my opinion, bigger than what most people think it is. And again, Bitcoiners are going to be very, very happy about Microsoft buying this amount of Bitcoin, buying $10-20 billion of Bitcoin potentially, etc., etc., etc. But that's not really the big news here. The big news, who the hell is messaging me right now? The big news is actually quite a lot bigger than that. So let's dive into it. So basically what's happened here is that a activist group has requested that Microsoft consider the investment in Bitcoin with their treasury assets. And they've stated in their filing, in SEC filings, that the reason why they want Microsoft to do this is because a similar company, a tech company called MicroStrategy, has outperformed Microsoft stock, and this would be a good way to create value for shareholders to put a certain percentage of assets in Bitcoin. Now, the board of Microsoft has said, we urge shareholders to vote no against this. Now, here's what's interesting. If you think about how the financial system works, the financial system works through a very small number of capital allocators basically dictating what the companies that want to receive their capital should do. One of those pro-Bitcoin capital allocators is Blackrock. Blackrock is also the second largest shareholder of Microsoft and MicroStrategy, funnily enough, but Microsoft. And I think that there is a conspiracy here going on behind the scenes that will emerge over the next few months and years, and that is this. BlackRock is the same company that told everybody that you must make ESG pivots, you must make environmental pivots, you must make societal, social, and governance pivots. And it started like this. It started by, it being a good idea. Hey, we should consider this, right? This is a good idea. We should actually consider this, and we should maybe make some pivots here and get into some ESG investments. Then a few years later, it developed into, hey, we highly suggest you should make some ESG pivots here. And then eventually it became one letter that Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, sent to all of their portfolio companies, which is basically every company in the American public stock market, quite simply, and said BlackRock will refuse capital. I'm paraphrasing. BlackRock will refuse capital to companies that do not pivot towards an ESG stance. So if you don't hire the weirdos, you don't start changing the weather, you don't start, doing all these fancy things that ESG came along with, then we will not extend capital to those companies, which forced the American stock market, the American corporate landscape to shift towards ESG. Now, I'm going to do a video tomorrow or this weekend on the emerging impact of Bitcoin on the investment landscape and portfolio returns. So subscribe to the channel or follow me for that, because that's going to be quite interesting. But just coming back to this, if they've done that for ESG and it generated a 5%, 5.5% yearly compound, which was underperforming everything basically, what makes you think they're not going to do that for Bitcoin when Bitcoin's outperforming every single asset? It's the best performing ETF they've ever put out. It is the fastest growing asset humanity has ever seen. They completely understand it, and Larry Fink's out there talking about how great of an investment this is. So the way I look at this is as follows. I think that this group that is asking Microsoft to study this, I think they're in some way, right, being influenced to do this. Maybe it's just a shareholder just saying, hey, you know, we think that you should increase value by holding Bitcoin. It's not a bad idea at all for any of these companies. But the thought process that I have is this is part of a greater plan, and this is beginning at this moment in time with Microsoft, right? Why hasn't it happened with Apple yet? All of a sudden, it happened with Microsoft, right? So Microsoft comes along and is told, hey, you should consider a Bitcoin investment. Right now, their shareholders are going to be looking at the share price today, which is pumping 4 times more than Apple on just the news of this. And even if entities like Blackrock were not behind this urging of Microsoft to look at this, they cannot ignore the share price pump difference as a result of the idea of having Bitcoin on a balance sheet. You can't ignore that. Even if it wasn't your idea, even if you were sitting there going, hey, where the hell did this come from? You can no longer ignore it because of the share price performance today based on the news of yesterday. And that's what I think, that's the conversation that's going to be happening. And I think that this is part of a greater plan here, which is going to be to turn, and as I've said it last year, Bitcoin will become ESG 2.0 for BlackRock. And every company that BlackRock invests in eventually will have to have Bitcoin related investments, because it is the only way that they can increase returns. It is the only way that they can increase shareholder returns. And this is an extremely easy way to do it. You take the balance sheet, you take a certain percentage of that balance sheet, and you dump it into Bitcoin. We've proven the concept with MicroStrategy. No one needs to do it that big. No one needs to do it that crazy. But if you take 4 or 5% of your balance sheet and you put it into Bitcoin, and then that starts growing, you're now, you know, growing the American stock market, and the value creation that's happening is unreal, right? So that's what I think is happening here. This is one of the very first sort of cookies crumbling into the idea that Bitcoin is ESG 2.0. And I was like shocked to see it so early, but also kind of wasn't surprised that this is what's happening, because again, look who the second biggest shareholder is. And by the way, the first biggest shareholder is Vanguard. And what we know about Vanguard is that Vanguard likes Bitcoin. They just don't like Bitcoin, right? They like Bitcoin through equities. They don't mind MicroStrategy. Everyone's going on about Vanguard. The one equity that you could buy to get Bitcoin exposure through Vanguard when they said no Bitcoin was MicroStrategy. And they're, again, one of the biggest shareholders in Microsoft here. If not, no, actually, they are the biggest shareholder in Microsoft. And so, you know, you got the first two, the top 2 shareholders that are sitting there going, hey, wait a second, this just pumped our bags, and it's just an idea at this point. Even if we weren't behind this, we should probably take a look at this. We should probably put someone on this. We should probably put a team on this to analyze how much value could be created by making this decision. And ultimately, everyone's going on about the board. Oh, well, you know, there's like Bitcoin lawyers all over the place, right? Like keep talking about the board. Fuck the board. Because if the shareholders are motivated enough, you can replace the board, right? We've seen this many times in businesses where you can just replace the board if the shareholders are behind the decision. And that's what matters. It's the shareholders that's what matters. Now, this I think is coming to a head on December 10th, so it'll be interesting to see, you know, how this pans out here. But from my perspective, again, this is the starting days, the starting things of how Bitcoin becomes ESG 2.0. You have the corporate America, you know, the Bitcoin takeover of corporate America by having Bitcoin on balance sheet. That does not mean that they will do what MicroStrategy has done. I do not think that happens. I do not think Microsoft decides, hey, what we're going to do is just pivot straight to 100% Bitcoin play. I do not think that happens, because there's too much of a premium on Microsoft stock for them to innovate and continue to doing new things, which MicroStrategy did not have, right? So I think that this is slowly a way to start seeping Bitcoin into corporate America, and this should happen more and more and more. And I'll be very intrigued if the vote passes in December for Microsoft to study this, and you'll know that there's serious people behind this if the board starts getting replaced and people start leaving and people start moving around and being moved around like pawns, because that's exactly what they are. The shareholders are always in control here. And understand this, the two biggest shareholders of Microsoft are Vanguard number one, Blackrock number two, and they're both pro-Bitcoin. Vanguard's just pro-Bitcoin through equities because it matches their ethos and everything else. Blackrock is heavily pro-Bitcoin. So I would say that there's something going on behind the scenes here. Obviously, it's all speculation, but there's something going on behind the scenes here to move corporate America slowly but surely towards Bitcoin. And again, I'm going to be, the reason for, it's quite funny because I was thinking of putting out the other video today, but this just happened. But the other video I want to talk about is going to walk you through the actual numbers of why this is incentivized. That's why subscribe to the channel, follow me, and that will come out in the next few days, because I've been crunching some numbers and figuring out, wait, it doesn't make sense not to do this. So I want to break those numbers down for you. And this is the type of moves that you're going to see. You're going to see more and more companies have this happen. You're going to see more and more companies have to face the answer of, do we need to consider Bitcoin? And regardless of whether it happens or not, in this instance, this is the starting moments of how Bitcoin starts taking over Wall Street, starts taking over corporate America, and how eventually every company will have Bitcoin on the balance sheet, especially as the FASB rules change, etc., etc. So this is very, very exciting, but ultimately there's always only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.